Welcome to the FF Forge. My name is Steve, and here we are today to talk about some value picks for DFS, specifically Draftkings DFS in the divisional week here of 2023 for the NFL playoffs. A little quick peek at what we're looking at here. Here is a temperature gauge. It's just a matchup gauge. Good would be green, as it always will be here, and red would be bad, and everything in between. Then, of course, we have the player name. Here is in lower expectations, higher expectations. This is a range that these players are expected to score within an X amount of time, given the matchups. This is based on their performances throughout the season, as well as their opponent and how teams typically do against those opponents. So a lot of little factors going into these. And you can find these projections up on my website throughout the regular fantasy football season, www.theffforge.com, throughout the fantasy football season. But we're done with that. So here is where you can see them for now. And here's the DK price. And then here is going to be how we're going to determine the value. And this is going to be the amount of points per dollar. So the more points per dollar spent, the better. And we have that math done here for the lower expectation, for the higher expectation. And then I have the players ordered in order of the average fantasy points per dollar spent here, which is this furthest right column. So let's just get right into this for the quarterbacks this week. And as you can see, Brock Purdy is the #1 value pick for the quarterback position this week at $5,400 on DK. He may not have the highest or lowest expectation here for points, darn near the lowest, but on the high end, looking pretty good. I like it. I think, it's a really good price. He's the cheapest quarterback you can get, and I don't expect him to be the lowest scoring quarterback. He's going up against Dallas this week. That probably has a lot to do with this pricing, but I think San Francisco is built to take advantage of a defense like Dallas's if they aren't either playing an awesome game, like they hope to play, or if they're not careful. Dallas's defense can be quite aggressive. San Francisco's can easily counter that, and that's kind of how they're built, is to trick teams into those big plays. And we saw Brock Purdy also open it up a little bit through the air. As of recent, he's showing that he can get the ball into his wide receivers' hands out on the perimeter. So, Purdy's looking pretty good at 5,400. Then Dak Prescott's the second best value pick here. Going up against San Francisco, they do let up some yards at least. Their strength is really against the rushing attack. Do I feel ultra comfortable with Dak? Not necessarily, but he is a decent value at least. And that's enough of that. He will be making one of my lineups. By the way, at the end of this video, I do go over 3 different lineups that I have set up for you. Actually, 4 in this video. The third value receiver quarterback here is going to be Jalen Hurts, who is also quite possibly going to be the #1 quarterback on the week. So I really, really like Jalen Hurts this week as a good quarterback pick to both be a good value and be a pure points getter for your lineup. Then Daniel Jones is 4th on this list. Josh Allen's 5th. Trevor Lawrence is 6th on this list. And to be quite honest, I was really surprised that he's basically the worst projected quarterback on my projections. He does have probably the single best matchup this week as far as quarterbacks go. You could argue that Patrick Mahomes would be in a better spot, but Kansas City, if things go as Las Vegas has it scripted, might be running out towards the game, towards the end of the game. And so Trevor Lawrence may have some opportunities to, have to pass deep and get some of those a late garbage touchdown on top of things, that type of thing going into factors into this equation. And so, I like Trevor quite a bit this week, so this surprises me. I didn't end up getting him in, I don't think, any of my lineups, but he will be by the time that the games are going, just not for this video. Joe Burrow is a guy that I definitely don't feel a need to push into my matchups this week, but of course, that could be a really, really high-scoring game. Really not any bad options at quarterback this week, except for one, I think. I just don't think it's worth paying up for Patrick Mahomes. I'm in total agreement here with my value numbers that we got. And in terms of Patrick Mahomes, I don't think it's necessary to spend up for him. There's so many good options this week, and I definitely could be outscored by plenty of guys. He's nice and safe, but unless you're in a small matchup with very few opponents, I don't think you need to go safe there. Pick a guy, go with it. All right, I just shrunk myself here in the corner, so now let's look at the wide receiver value plays. There are quite a few of them. So Zay Jones is the top wide receiver value play, 4,700. Good price. Definitely has a high upside. We know that, so can't argue with that too much. Brandon Ayuk right up here as well, and Richie James Jr. still hanging in there even after last week. I did had projected him last week based on like his final 5 weeks of the season or something, and that bit me in the butt a little bit, so got knocked down. I took his most recent performance in the playoffs and did apply that heavily to correct a little bit of my previous projection job with Richie James, and got him more on a level of his season long expectation. I do actually like Richie James Jr. a fair bit in this matchup because he might have trouble getting the ball in the other receiver's hands. Maybe he'll be the guy to just benefit, dump it off to on a lot of plays. But definitely see that scenario working out like that. And we have Michael Gallup, Isaiah Hodgins. Before we get to a couple of big hitters here in CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown, much better values than Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs down there, and I'm pretty much in agreement with this. I like both of them, for the price savings compared to, I think those would be the top two most expensive players. I'm happy to settle down a little bit and get one of these guys instead, save that money, spend it elsewhere, and I do have a position where I want to be spending that this week, the running backs, so we'll get there soon. Further down on this list, we have Darius Slayton, Tyler Boyd. I was very tempted to take him in my in one of my lineups. You'll see which one. Then Christian Kirk. We're gonna get to some of the kind of second set of best talented wide receivers, best expectations, kind of in the same tier as Zay Jones and Brandon Ayuk. And that's gonna be Christian Kirk, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins. Definitely like all of these guys. Decently priced, decent values, not bad options there. I'd say I feel a little bit safer with Christian Kirk compared to these two up here, but that's about it. Then Gabe Davis is right here, kind of in the center for value, followed by Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, and there's a couple of things just to cover down here. Mecole Hardman may or may not play this week. It kind of looks like he may not be making it, or at least not be very healthy. And if that's the case, that's why I projected Kadarius Toney. But if Mecole Hardman's good to go, especially if there's good news on the health front for him, it really wouldn't be taking any kind of deep shot on Kadarius Toney in that event. Mecole Hardman would be a decent option at a good price. The other spot's going to be this Cole Beasley, Khalil Shakir, and Isaiah McKenzie. Looks like Isaiah McKenzie's going to be good to go. And in that event, Cole Beasley, Khalil Shakir makes them a lot harder to take chances on. And I'm even concerned about Isaiah McKenzie. I feel like this, I don't know what they're going to do. There's just too many questions there between those three. And it should bring up real quick before we move on to the running backs here, Devonta Smith, all the way down here in terms of value. He is quite expensive based on a lot of his recent production. So to me, he's just a guy, if he's the cheapest option of these heavy hitters. So in that sense, he's a good value, even though it doesn't work out mathematically. If I don't think there's anything wrong with Devonta Smith. He could very well have a very good week this week. So yeah, move on to the running backs. And here we are, and you might find this a little bit shocking. The most expensive, the number one costing running back this week, Christian McCaffrey, is also the number one value. And much like last week with Saquon Barkley, I have a really hard time not putting Christian McCaffrey into my lineups this week. I would go pretty heavy on him if you do multiple lineups, and if you just do a few, I would, even one, I would make sure to get his butt in there. And I think we were able to find some savings elsewhere to be able to do that, and potentially even stack him with Saquon Barkley. I don't feel comfortable with my number 2, 3, 4 value picks here a whole lot. There's obviously upside to these guys. They're good. Why they project nicely for their prices. But I have major concerns for each of them as well. The next guy, Miles Sanders. Let's just actually compare Miles Sanders to Jerick McKinnon. if you are in a smaller lineup matchup, a contest, not a whole lot of people in it, 20, 25 people, then maybe you take this $300 discount for Miles Sanders with that higher floor compared to Jerick McKinnon, more of a sure thing as far as the amount of work that he'll get. But I tend to like this ceiling and a very nice matchup for Jerick McKinnon here over Miles Sanders for $300 more. So I would, if you're working with around this much money, looking between these two, I would try to jam Jerick McKinnon in there over Miles Sanders. I think the upside is much better, and in DFS, ultimately, that's what we want, is that upside. And then we've got Devin Singletary, James Cook back to back. It looks like James Cook in the playoffs here maybe taking over the reins as the more used guy. It's still pretty darn neck and neck, however. And so I couldn't quite project. I think the projections were almost identical for them as far in terms of how much they're expected to be used. So the gap has narrowed now to them being neck and neck, and we'll see. With one more week, I would feel comfortable putting a little bit more usage to James Cook if he gets more once again. Then Ezekiel Elliott's a guy who I would totally be fading this week at running back. Don't like that in that matchup at all. So I'm happy that he's down here in the value chart. Isaiah Pacheco, there's a couple of worlds where I see him having a really good week, so I definitely don't mind him even if he's not a great value. I think he's a solid enough play. Jerick McKinnon's still the more exciting one out of the two, but the two worlds most likely where I see Isaiah Pacheco having a good week are, first of all, Kansas City comes in here, and they are actually the ones trying to keep the other offense off of the field strategically. I could definitely see that being the game plan and coming out and trying to establish the run with Isaiah Pacheco. The passing game, for the most part, until Jerick McKinnon's really been integrated into this, and earlier in the season, while Mecole Hardman started to get going. Other than those two factors, the passing game's been a little bit one-dimensional, a little bit struggles, and we've also seen some decline in Travis Kelce's production as of late as well, and I don't know if that's due to age, maybe kind of resting, getting ready for the playoffs. I'll touch on that in just a second, but whatever the case, that's the first world where I see them leaning on Isaiah Pacheco in the run game a little bit and trying to keep Jaguars' offense off the field, not wanting to get into a shootout with them. Very much possible. The other world is they come out on all cylinders. Maybe Trevor Lawrence has a couple of turnovers again, whatever the case, they get a lead. Or at least by the third quarter, the end of the third quarter, they have a nice healthy lead, and then they lean on Isaiah Pacheco to help run out the clock. And then last up here, we have Elijah Mitchell. I feel about the same of him as I do Ezekiel Elliott. I don't think there's a way I'm getting them into my lineups unless I'm building a lot of lineups like a pro, which I'm not a pro gambler, so I don't do that. Now on to the tight ends. I did something funky here with the projections. Just look at them for a little bit surprising. Once again, you could just pause these throughout the video if you wanted to use them to help set your lineups. You could also go up onto the website, www.theff4. I should have this up as late as Friday morning at the latest. But for the tight ends, what I did is I took their most recent performance. So for outside of Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert, didn't do this for them. But every other tight end, I took their playoff game, and I had that count for half of the projections that I did. So I took their season-long projection, and I took their one single game projection here as a most recent, and I sliced them into each other. So players like Dalton Schultz, Evan Ingram, who had really good games, their projections look pretty darn nice, nicer than they've probably looked all season. That is part of the reason for this order. And then you look at the bottom there, George Kittle, who has had a pretty solid season, especially as of late. Did not have a huge game in the first round of the playoffs, and so when I spliced it, his projection went in the other direction, and we'll explain why I actually don't mind that very shortly. But you can look at this list. I'm not going to go over them all. Guys who I do tend to like the most here are going to be Evan Ingram. I still like him quite a bit this week, even if he doesn't repeat. Dallas Goedert is probably my favorite guy in terms of value, cost and expectations of what he could do on the field. And then I don't mind Dawson Knox a whole lot. I don't really want to be spending up for Travis Kelce. I want to spend that money elsewhere. Very expensive for especially based on recent production. A guy who, just hasn't been absolutely great as of recent. But I mean, you want to spend up for him, go for it. It's Travis Kelce. I'm not going to try and talk you out of that specifically, but it's very expensive. And I would also like to mention, I'm coming into this. I came into this season with my projection with Travis Kelce as my number 2 tight end on the season, had Mark Andrews number 1, and the main thought process behind that was that Travis Kelce near the second half or towards the end of the season would start to trail off in his production because of his age, and we did see that. Now, once again, as I started to say just a little bit ago, maybe that was more of him kind of taking it easy, resting the body, and getting prepared for the playoffs so that he could give it all yet again in the playoffs. That's very possible. Heck, even if he's all banged up and everything and he gives it his all and he's just a little bit slower, does that really matter a whole lot between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce? No, he could have 4 touchdowns any given day, 100 and something yards, 12 catches. Always possible for Travis Kelce. Not always possible for other tight ends. He's elite, but don't love the value this week. And George Kittle, when he's been on the field with Deebo Samuel, he's been more of a blocker when they've been healthy on offense. And so with last week's results, with Deebo back, that concerns me a lot for George Kittle. So I'm erring on the side of caution, and I really don't love George Kittle this week. Upside is, of course, great for him, and he's not that bad of a price. And if I hadn't done what I did with the projections, he definitely wouldn't be the bottom value guy here. Take this with a grain of salt, especially if you are someone like me who prefers the larger picture compared to a recency biased picture. But if you like trends and you like recent production, then this chart's the chart for you as far as value goes. I don't love the tight end position this week for choices. Now let's look at my lineups that I've made and entered already into contests. My first lineup we're going to call my value lineup, and that starts off with Brock Purdy at quarterback. I just pretty much went through and started putting the guys with the most value in, and it worked out where I was able to get some of the higher value guys at all the positions here. So at Purdy, McCaffrey, and Barkley, both at running back. Love that. Followed by Zay Jones and Brandon Ayuk, and then step down there with Richie James Jr. I think he's really the only guy who's like not in the top half of the value charts, if I remember correctly. Maybe he is. Then I also have Evan Ingram in here at tight end, and AJ Brown as a wide receiver there, so kind of the best wide receiver. I didn't know, as you can see, in the order that I have them in, I was just kind of going for the value and trying to save money first after I spent so much for Barkley and McCaffrey, but worked out nicely. And then for the DST, I put the Eagles in there. I like that lineup quite a bit. Hopefully Purdy could have another good solid week and keep up with some of the other guys again. Otherwise, that really hurts because there could be some very high quarterback scores this week. Definitely possible. So now let's go to my second lineup. And once I labeled contrarian there, and I knew that the value one was a value lineup, I had to give this lineup a name, so we called it the underdog stack, because if you look down here with my quarterback Jalen Hurts, I have his tight end Dallas Goedert, probably not the number 1 stack that people are going to put with Jalen Hurts given the 2 wide receivers that he has, and I don't have either of those wide receivers here. I got Quez Watkins, saved myself some cash money so I could spend that get a little more even-keeled lineup everywhere else, and just hoping, that he pays off. One big play is basically what I'm hoping here for Quez. Maybe 1.5 big plays. That would work too. A couple catches. Going for it there. Then I have Christian McCaffrey yet again. Like I said, going to be hard for me to keep him out of my lineups, but I did manage to do that for you in this third lineup. Went ahead and grabbed Jerick McKinnon, like that upside, then CeeDee Lamb, Christian Kirk, and Brandon Ayuk, all solid picks, I think. And I got myself the Jaguars defense as well to save on some cash. So as you can see, the difference in the quality here by saving so much money at quarterback compared to spending up a little bit for Jalen Hurts. Is still the third least expensive guy, but save money here too, and save money here with Quez, and that's still the lineup that it looks like. Don't have Barkley. I got McKinnon. I mean, I don't know about you, but I kind of like this a little bit more. Now, let's look at my contrarian lineups. I did a 3.1 for this. I struggled with this, changed it around a few times, but here's what I ended up on. And so we got Dak Prescott in at quarterback, so I took my top 3 value quarterbacks. Then we've got Travis Etienne, Joe Mixon, 2 guys who I don't feel comfortable with, but definitely have some upside regardless. Followed by A.J. Brown, Debo Samuel, Juju Smith-Schuster, another guy who I really don't feel comfortable with, but could have a massive game. And this is part of why this is my contrarian lineup. I don't think most of these guys are going to have a lot of usage, by the way. That's why it's contrarian. Then Tony Pollard, I do actually have a fair amount of excitement for him this week. Don't really think that Zeke is going to flourish in this matchup, and think that it's possible that they could rely on Pollard a little bit in that passing attack, especially. Let's see, Knox in at tight end, and the Bengals for DST. This one was tight to figuring out guys that I felt comfortable enough, and so I really don't feel super comfortable with this lineup. So went ahead, did a little bit of a different lineup, save a little bit of money here, and went for the other wide receiver there in Philadelphia. So we got the same quarterback, same 2 running backs. Switched this up, kept it with the same with Debo. Then I have Isaiah Hodgins in here, just maybe he can keep the magic going, followed by Hayden Hurst to save a little bit of cash money, so that way we could step it up to CeeDee Lamb here and at wide receiver, and just feel that all in all, I feel a little bit more comfortable with these guys than I do with these guys, maybe. I don't know. And then the Bengals defense here again. So 2 contrarian lineups, they're slightly different. There's 100,000 different ways that you can mess with these a little bit here. But I do think that saving some money here does allow you to play interesting here. I don't know. This is probably my favorite lineup here. Maybe Jalen Hurts, McCaffrey, Barkley, and doing a couple of value picks here. But I wanted to diversify things a little bit here and not have the same players everywhere. So that is it. Those are my lineup suggestions and all of the values. Hopefully this will help you to set your own lineups and win some of that cash money. Have fun, enjoy the games this weekend. Just check out my AFC, NFC videos to just see a little bit about what I think about these games, game previews. That's it. Peace out.